Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live, my friends. It's so good to see you. You know, we all have a money story, and sometimes those subconscious stories keep you stuck, like really stuck. And today we'll hear from certified coach and special guest Alison Reeves, who is my dear friend. I'm so excited to have her on the show. She is going to share her insights to help you reveal and heal your hidden wealth wound, which you'll learn more about in a second. So, as you tune in, if you're watching today live or watching the replay, don't be shy. Say hi. I want to welcome you to the show because this show is all about you and helping you live an abundant life. Now, if you have questions and you don't want to share online, feel free to drop us a note. Hey, I'd love to hear from my guest. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Coach E Urban, all one word, so you can get access to all of the shows and the podcast. Now, if you aren't sure what a wealth wound is, let me know if this sounds familiar. Yeah, you get promoted, but you didn't really get a real raise. Or you're looking for a new role, but you really feel like you have to check all the boxes before you can apply. Yeah, you have to be 100% qualified to ask to move up or get a new position within the company or take on any new responsibilities. Maybe even you make a lot of money, but it never seems to stick around. You want to achieve more, but the path just isn't clear, or maybe it's super scary for you. Or maybe you've hit a career ceiling and feel stuck. If you get frustrated because people who act entitled get more pay, promotions, and opportunities than you do, and you're wondering when it's your turn, well, my friend, you're in the right place because today we're going to talk about these amazing insights from my friend Alison Reeve, and she's a certified coach who's helped hundreds of people shift from stuck to successful. Now, she's managed successful marketing teams for several multi-million-dollar companies before becoming a full-time business coach, and has since helped thousands of creators worldwide grow their visibility and their income through coaching and courses. What I love the most is her business is to help people make more money, but her mission is to help people love their lives. So please welcome me and welcoming Alison to the show. Yay!
Oh, I'm just like beaming when you read that intro. Thank you
I
so
just love
much.
it. I mean, I
Yeah.
just love everything about it. And I was just telling Alison, I can talk really. It's my live show. If I want to talk a different language, I was just telling Alison before we went live that I love everything that she's doing right now because it's so transformational. And what's really interesting is we're in this age, this time, which can be really exciting and super stressful all at the same time, where we're really in reinventing how we do work, how we do business, how we live our lives. We're in that shift, and that shift can be stressful, can feel hard or burdensome, and a lot of people are letting go of a lot of things that are no longer serving them. And it can be scary a little bit and kind of unclear. So Alice is one of those amazing people who helps people find that clarity and connect to living in a more abundant life and professional career. So I'm really excited to hear what
Yeah.
you have to say today. But before we kick off, hey, I'd like to know. I mean, I kind of know, but I'm sure other people would like to know, other than me, like what really got you interested in this particular focus? Because I know you've a very successful marketing background. You've helped businesses grow exponentially. You've helped entrepreneurs grow exponentially, and then there's this mindset thing coming in and really understanding, okay, how does the person influence the outcome?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a windy story, but I've always kind of had a heart-centered edge, and like in 2011, that's when I started my first blog, and it was about spirituality a little bit and then turned into self-care a lot, and then I sold that blog in 2019, early, I guess it was 2020. So I've always kind of had like that self-care mindset edge, but in my marketing career, it was always like push, 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 and there wasn't really another way. I joined a coaching program. Like I always heard a little bit about mindset and how that can play a role in your success, but I always thought it was baloney until 2019. I joined one of the most influential coaching programs that I'd ever been in. And the way they taught mindset, it just clicked with me. And then when I learn something, part of my integration process is I always like share. I make it my
Mhm.
own, and then I turn it into something that my people can benefit from. And when I started teaching mindset, I would say like probably 3/4 of my case studies mention that as the biggest reason for their success.
Mm-hmm.
So for whatever reason, the way that I was teaching, it was really resonating. And that made me realize like my people are hitting a wall and they think that it's strategy and it's actually mindset. But then I had a few clients, some of my most successful clients, work with me and have to take a break for months after working with me. And at first I was just kind of frustrated, like, I don't want
What's
the
wrong
like,
with you?
why are you stopping? Like, why are you stopping?
You're
But
so
then
successful. What are you
yeah,
doing? Yeah.
after like this happened 3 or 4 times, I was like, what's the common denominator? Like, I'm not responsible for it, but I am the common denominator. What's the thing
Mm,
here that's playing a role? And I realized that strategy, you think it's a strategy when really it's the mindset. And then you get to this point where you think it's the mindset and it's really your nervous system. And
mm,
so that, like the somatic piece and the certification that I got, that was where
right.
the next invisible wall is like, you can do all the mindset work, but if your body doesn't believe it. And so the way that I got here was my own process and transformation, and then
Mm-hmm.
just like observing other people. I'm like, what's happening? There's something happening here that everybody's going through, and there has to be a solution, including myself. Like,
Right.
as successful as I was, I never stopped having anxiety around money. And I realized
Mm-hmm.
it's not about the money. It's about something else. There's something
Right.
else going on.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we're talking about today is helping, I guess, well, like I said, everybody has a money story. And it's getting past, and the thing about it is it's totally subconscious. We're not thinking, oh, well, I'm pushing away money. No, of course not. We're not thinking that. And it's happening, right? And it can come in such subtle ways, like not going for the promotion you're totally worthy of getting, or you're pushing away potential opportunities because you don't feel like you're ready for them or whatever it is. I mean, you come in a lot of subtle different ways. Other things maybe you may get like really angry in certain situations or at certain people, and you don't even really like. It doesn't make logical sense,
Yeah.
but it feels like I have this like visceral reaction. What is going on? Chances are that's linked to something.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see that with like patterns in your own life. Like one
Mm-hmm.
of the tools you referenced when we were chatting earlier was a workbook I have called the money mapping system. And we look at like patterns. And like one of my patterns that relates to what you were just saying is I kept attracting jobs where I was like a manager who also had to do a lot of other roles and jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I just was like frustrated that that was all my marketing career could ever be. But then I realized again, who's the common denominator? Because the boss is always changing. I'm the common denominator. So,
Right.
like, one of my limiting beliefs is like, I didn't believe that I could get paid more unless I was working my butt off. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but then I didn't want to work any harder. And so I had a hard time attracting jobs that paid the level at which I wanted to get paid and also just the level that was the market value for the role.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, and the examples you gave in the introduction are also relevant too. I'm like, I I'm in this leadership role and I feel like I have to do all these things now to earn this position in the leadership role. When that may not be the thing.
Right. And it's also true that in this society, in the U.S. particularly, and in let's say some parts of Europe as well, the UK especially, um, but particularly in the U.S., we have this work hard ethic,
Hmm.
right? This work hard, play hard, and it's like a mantra, like, oh, well, you have to work hard, you have to work hard to get to say you work hard, work hard. It's bullshit. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's not true. No one ever got a gold star, promotion, thumbs up. Ooh, great for you. You worked really hard. It doesn't. That's not how it functions. Typically, what happens when you work really hard and you believe that success only comes as a result of hard work, you just get more hard work.
Hmm.
That's how it. That's how the process functions. Um, and what's really crazy is you'll do it to yourself.
Yeah. The problem with hard work is that it does work until a point. And that's the problem with, but then you hit this, it's very limiting to believe that hard work is the only way to get what you want because you have a limit to how much hard work you can do. But that's the
Right.
problem with like pushing so hard in your career is that we think it works because it did one time.
Mm-hmm.
But then you hit a wall. You can't work any harder. And then what?
Right. Exactly. I mean, there's a limit to it. I think we're seeing some of that right now. I know pretty much everybody I've talked to say, "Oh, I'm so tired, I'm demotivated, I'm just exhausted. I can't focus. I don't want to do work. Like I don't want to do work. I really don't want to be here." And so, quiet quitting. Oh, people are quiet quitting. Well, first of all, the person who coined the term quiet quitting was not exactly someone I feel like is qualified to, but they had a level of prominence and they were a certain generation who was that hard work, true grit. That's the way you get ahead. Yeah, no, because, and particularly not now. I mean, we kind of get away with it before the pandemic. Now we really can't, and I think we're seeing the results of that. You don't have the bandwidth anymore because fundamentally, let's just say your tolerance for doing is this cup. Well, the pandemic brought it to here.
Right. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
your ability to handle change and uncertainty and stress. Humans are equipped to handle long-term stress. We're just not. First of all, we
Yeah.
don't have the wiring. We don't. We are a fight or flight. Oh, the saber-tooth tiger is going to bite me. Do I fight it or run away? That's it, pretty much. Then after that, a lot of really bad things start happening. We start going into a sense of, as our safety, fundamental safety and well-being. We start becoming on a high alert mode. We're always in this fight or flight. Some people report immediately upon waking state of threat.
Yeah.
That's not healthy.
Yeah. That's such a great point of like the cup example. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like collectively we're seeing a lot of people like in 2020 and 2021, we all like were truly in survival mode. So when we talk about like your nervous system, right? People talk about in the coaching industry, people like to talk about like doing something that feels edgy for them. It feels edgy. And what that refers to is like, here's your window of tolerance. So you have the cup example of like, this is what my nervous system can tolerate. If I
Mm-hmm.
go outside of that, my nervous system becomes dysregulated. And a dysregulated nervous system is when you're waking up in fight or flight, or even worse, freeze or fawn. Because we have to go through the parasympathetic and sympathetic to get to the freeze and fawn.
Right.
So what 2021 and 2020 did was it got us past that window of tolerance, but a lot of us didn't work on building resilience or releasing the stuck energy from all that stress. And so
Mm-hmm.
now I've seen some people like catching on, like, okay, this isn't the way, or like we're having this conversation today. People are starting to know, like, okay, the constant push, the waking up in fight or flight, this
Mm-hmm.
can't be the rest of my life. So what else is there? But that's like we all got to that window of tolerance of like you can't do any more without becoming dysregulated in your nervous system.
Absolutely. And for anybody tuning either now and lurking or later on watching the replay, let me know. If you feel comfortable, you can chat. If you're not, double tasking, you're working and also listening. If you can chat, let me know. What's going on for you right now? What are you feeling? Because I know for me, for a while, and I'm working on with Allison's expert insight that she shares, you know, regulating my nervous system much differently. But I was constantly waking up immediately, fight or flight, because my brain would go, "This is what it would do." It's so awful. I developed this habit, and a lot of what we experience is just habitual ways of thinking. It's programming, right? We program ourselves. You do it often enough, like once or twice, it's not a big deal. But once you start making a habit of thinking or doing something a certain way, it becomes your body and brain thinks, "Oh, this is normal. Keep doing that," and you don't want to. So my brain would go, "Okay, let me think. What would freak her out?" And she hasn't thought about recently. "Oh, I know. You didn't put the whatever in the refrigerator last night." And I'm like, "Ah!" I wake up in this panic, like, "Yes, I did." But I'm already now in the state what it thinks is normal, which
Mm,
is not what I want. So then I have to go through the process of I have to regulate my nervous system every flipping morning.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The good news is it doesn't last forever. It will get a different habit. It just takes doing that. So, Allison, tell me, When we're talking about feeling worthy of wealth, we've talked about some of the symptoms and side effects. Are there any others that you're seeing? Because we definitely want to help people tuning in either now or later, help them identify, like, is that me? Because quite frankly, it is. Like everybody has a money story. We
Yeah.
usually don't recognize it.
Yeah. So I would almost take a step back and say, like, because there's kind of four. So when we talk about like worthy of wealth in general,
Hmm.
there's four solutions to dealing with worthiness issues or dysregulation in general. And
Hmm.
so like I would look at the symptoms of the problem first. The four kind of like, and I want to say this is a framework and then come back to it because it's kind of a big question on like what else could be going on. But when you're dealing with like fixing a mindset issue or fixing,
Hmm.
let's say fixing a pattern. It's like I wake up every morning and I worry about if I put something away in the fridge. Like for that example that you just gave.
Hmm.
So is that it could be a mindset issue. It could be a practical issue of like, I just need to put things away in the fridge. It could be a nervous system issue or it could be an energetic issue. And
Hmm.
so, like, using a job example, like, I'll go back to my example earlier, like, figuring out, so those are like the four problems. It could be a mindset issue, it could be a practical issue, it could be that you're dysregulated, or it could be like energetics.
Hmm.
And so, going back to the example of like, I keep attracting jobs where I'm underpaid as a manager and I have a lot of work to do that isn't managing. So
Hmm.
like is that a mindset issue? Is it a practical issue? Is it a nervous system issue? Is it an energetic issue? A part of it is a mindset issue. Like
Hmm.
because when I did the money mapping system, I realized I feel like I can't get paid a lot unless I'm working really hard.
Right.
But then there's part of it that's a practical issue too. Where it's like the action I'm going to take is I'm need to have create some boundaries around the jobs I'm willing to take.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So kind of taking a step back and giving more context to the question of like, what other issues can happen? Well, there's a lot. And then the solution depends on what the real problem is.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's not all or nothing, right? Like I tell people, it's not rewiring your brain for success, which is my jam. That's what I do. It's not just mindset. That's important. It's certainly a part of it. It's a real important part of it. But there's more to it than that. There's also some really easy ways because a lot of people are like, okay, I get it. It's a mindset thing. I've had this mindset for 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, right? I've had it for a while. They don't believe fundamentally that they can influence change on it, or the thought of it is just because they're so overwhelmed, right? The cup runneth over already. The thought of doing more, they just can't, right? They can't even wrap their brains around it. So trying to make it really easy for people to go, okay, look, you don't have to rewire like everything. You don't become a different person. That's not the point. And it can be really easy. So if someone identifies, okay, gosh, you know what? Um, I'm limiting myself in my career. To your example, I keep allowing myself to get into these positions where I'm, you know, not doing exactly either what I want to do, or I'm doing more than I feel like I should, or I have to. I'm connected, working hard with this success, which is very common. What do they do once they've figured that out?
What do they do once they figure that out?
Hmm.
So so the story is the job. Tell me again.
So they've connected working hard with success, like you
They've connected
figured out.
working hard success. Okay. Yeah. So like I would say the first step is figuring out if there's any limiting beliefs behind that or patterns.
Hmm.
So like they've connected working hard with success. So the first step is like as little as doing an affirmation around I am inherently worthy of earning the money. Or if you can't create an affirmation, creating a bridge statement. And a bridge statement is basically a compromise to an affirmation because you affirmations don't work unless you can believe it. So
Hmm.
if it feels like bullshit, then you're not the affirmation's not gonna work for you. So creating an affirmation around that. And then the next step is the practical boundaries, right?
Hmm.
So like I'm taking responsibility around this
Hmm.
by deciding like so if the problem is I have to work hard for success, Some of my clients will create boundaries around like what time I get to the desk in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
turning off notifications on certain apps.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be the second thing I would do, is set the boundary around it. And then the third thing I would do, and this is why it's always more than one, right? The third thing you have to do is deal with the triggers that come up from the behavior change. And that's, I know when I talk about regulating a nervous system, it feels a little bit nebulous, but there's the practical side of like, okay, now I see the pattern. I am working too hard for my success. I've set some boundaries around this, so at a practical level, I can start moving into this. Now that I have the boundary around it, I find myself freaking the heck out every morning when I
Mm-hmm.
want to get to the desk at 7 instead of 9.
Yeah, because your
That
body's like,
it doesn't feel
something's
safe with the time.
wrong.
And
Right, right.
that is huge for, I think this is true for like taking time off in general. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's what you were saying earlier. I'm like, I've just done this for so long. How do I do something else?
Mm-hmm.
When you stop doing it, you can feel really anxious.
Yeah.
You can go into fight or flight because your body is like, I'm not safe. We're doing something different. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
safe. And that's where you look at, how can I regulate my nervous system through this trigger? So what does that mean? Well, you can regulate your nervous system through habits like breath work, cold showers, doing things that are challenging for you, public speaking, whatever. You can get edgy by doing habits, or you can work through a trigger through like somatic work or coaching yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when I feel triggered, when most people feel triggered, what do? I don't want to feel that.
Right.
I don't want to feel anxious. So I'm just going to be busy. I'm going to try to meditate. And then you're like all anxious while you're meditating. It doesn't
And
work.
actually, you make it worse.
You
What
make
I
it worse.
found is the more you push back against it, because I've been there, because doing, obviously, as a coach, I do work on myself and then populate what works for me, what's been proven. I have to prove something first. I mean, a little scientific about my process. And then I apply it in my coaching practice.
Yeah.
So with what I'm working on, if I'm working on something and I've shifted behaviors, the body freaks out because the programming it has says you have to do X, Y, and Z. When they
Yeah.
change that, you change the norm. And the body, fundamentally, we're just a big bag of chemicals. So you're not producing the same chemical mixture. So the body's like, what is going on? That's not okay. And
Mm.
now maybe even, particularly if you're trying to pry out a really fundamental belief, that might be linked to something have to do with safety and well-being. Like take, for example, and in order for me to manage the 5 bazillion things I have going on right now, full-time coaching business, very successful, doing all that, and oh yeah, I have 3 construction projects going on at once.
Yeah.
Now, logically, I can handle all this. My body freaking out.
Yeah.
Totally losing it. Oh my God. Because what do I have to do? I have to set boundaries around when I'm available for certain things. And when I
Mhm.
start doing that and not being, because I have very much, well, you have to be available this much, or you have to be this much independent. And otherwise, then the sky is going to fall. I mean, like you have to be independent. You have to have this level of doing. And whenever that shifts, the body freaks out, can't handle it.
Yeah.
So for me, Allison, let me know if this resonates with you. What I started doing was early in the morning, because I knew it was coming. I knew my body was going to throw something at me. It didn't have to be something I didn't put in the fridge, but it was always something like, oh, you have to call. You remember, you have to do this. It wanted to get me in a panic for whatever reason. So then early in the morning, what I would do is just immediately upon coming awake, I would immediately go into a gratitude practice.
Mm-hmm.
I start working on calming the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
When I could calm the nervous system, then I could think clearly. Because if I didn't do that, the whole day, it was just, I couldn't think.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was
And
like,
our brains are meant like this. Our brains are designed to survive, not to thrive. And if thriving was easy, everybody would do it. And it takes that effort. And
mm-hmm,
I love what you said about like waking up in the morning, practicing gratitude, because of what that's doing is it's rooting you in the current reality.
mm-hmm,
And then you're probably doing this subconsciously of like feeling the gratitude
Mm-hmm.
physically.
Yep.
And that, in addition to, because for a while I was like, a gratitude list felt really contrived to me for a while, where I'm like, blah, gratitude list. Like, I just, it felt so forced. And I realized there's these
Me too.
other, like, there's other needs like that. So I
Mm-hmm.
started writing, what are things that make me feel safe? What are things that make me feel supported? So what makes me feel safe is I have all the money to pay my bills right now. What makes me feel supported, because like as a leader, or as I'm an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
but it can feel like I'm constantly responsible for all my own stuff.
Yes.
That feels like a lot of pressure. So what are things that make me feel supported that are outside of me? Well, like every now and then, Crystal, my husband, will come in and bring me a Dr. Pepper and surprise me. So I'll be on a live and I'll see his little hand reach out from the door behind me, and he'll put a Dr. Pepper like right here on the shelf by my head.
That's so
But those are
funny.
things that make me feel supported. It's just a reminder. And so that it's still gratitude. It's just a different label. It's like, what makes me feel safe? What makes me feel supported? What feels luxurious? What feels luxurious is like wearing leggings every day. But like instead of just gratitude, but like that is one way to regulate your nervous system, to root yourself in the current reality of what feels
Mm-hmm.
good right now.
It's very, very similar to what I coach my clients in about the power pause,
Mm,
because if we don't periodically throughout the day come to the present moment, our brains, we can't. We build up too much what we call cognitive drift, or mental clutter, if you will, and your brain can get very chaotic. You find it hard to prioritize. It can start to go into fight or flight. I mean, a whole host of different things. In order to come to the present moment, it's very helpful to use a body as a tool to do that, because the body is always present. It doesn't have any concept of
mm,
past, future, always in the now. And that's one reason why, focusing on your breath, something simple, really simple, rubbing two fingertips together with intense focus and not thinking about
mm.
anything else. And thoughts will come up, by the way. You just have to say, okay, that's a thought, let it go.
Always go back to the physical sensation.
Always go back to the physical sensation, and doing that for just a few minutes. It doesn't have to be like 20 minutes of meditation, which, if you can do that, great. But not everybody has that in their day. They're super busy. They have to be on the next Zoom call or text Teams call, or they're already on a Teams call and they're like, I can't get through this Teams call. Maybe you just turn off the camera for a second and just go, okay, let me really focus on this for a second,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just come back to the present moment. Particularly, say, I was talking with a client the other week, and she's like, okay, I need to speak up more virtually. She goes, I do fantastic speaking up in person, but I have just like a mental block speaking up virtually. And so one of the things to help regulate the nervous system and to get her in a clarity in that present moment is focusing on that physicality, whether it be breath work or touch or sound. It also depends on what you gravitate towards too.
Yeah.
Some people are more auditory, some people are more visual, some people are more tactile. So you'll find that out pretty quick. Then you'll gravitate towards that. Oh, okay, really focus on just staring at something with intense focus and really understanding, oh, that's an interesting color, but not allowing any other thought. So that really leaning on your senses helps you become present. Does that resonate with your work, Allison?
It does. It does resonate. And it kind of reminds me of like, you can use the trigger to identify what tool might be the most helpful. So some of
Mm-hmm.
those are going to be like, what do I gravitate towards, whether it be sound or touch or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
the other thing can be like tracking like what the nervous system response is. And so am I in
Mm-hmm.
fight or flight, or am I in freeze or fawn? And so if you're in fight or flight, you need to slow down, focus, like
Mm-hmm.
a breath work. If
Right.
you're in freeze or fawn, you need to move. You need to use your voice and yell. You need to
Mm-hmm.
get unstuck to move
Yeah.
into the other phase of, and I was confused parasympathetic and sympathetic, but basically like the order in which you experience nervous system responses or triggers is fight, fright, flight, freeze, and then fawn. So if you're in freeze and fawn, in order to get regulated, you have to get back into fight and flight first.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can get back into, so if you're stuck, you've got to move. If you're already moving, you just have to calm down.
You have to
And
chill.
not just calm down, but it's more about like the stillness and the feeling. Whereas if you're like frozen, you've got to move. And so you can
Right.
kind of determine, am I like really anxious? So like I don't remember I got triggered last week around something, but the way that I was dealing with it was I just made myself really busy. I was like, and I just was like, I mean, I think I wrote about 6,000 words of blog posts last week for like no reason. I mean, not no reason, like it'll be helpful for SEO, but like, why? Like that was a lot of work. And
Yeah.
I was busy, busy,
You do
busy.
something for me.
Yeah. So I was just like, and I knew, I kind of loosely knew that I was doing this. I knew that I was feeling anxious and that was stressful. And then every time I felt anxious, I was just getting into more action. And then
Hmm.
I had a somatic session with my coach last week, and I needed to slow down. And then, so when I got back into my body, it just all this grief got released. But then there's sometimes where I'm like, I'll be in a smack session, or I'll feel like I'm stuck. Like I know I want to do something and I don't know what I want to do.
Mm.
I know I need to take action. I don't know what that is. I need to say something to this person and I'm not saying it. That's when you need to get into the action. So if
Right.
you're already in the frantic action. But yeah, so what you said about like what is it, that's a kind of a practical way to think about, okay, what is the trigger that I'm having right now? Here's some actions I might take. I'm like,
Hmm.
is it
Hmm.
already jittery? And I need to do breath work, meditation, or really feeling. It's
Hmm.
another thing is I heard recently was like meditation is an advanced practice. It's often taught to beginners.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, meditation's great. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
it truly is fantastic. And there's also other tools we can use that are a little bit more accessible
Yeah.
and
Like
it
breath
works for
work.
everybody.
Breath work doesn't, I mean, and breath work, like intensive breath work, there are some warnings around, because if you're, like I like to do like the intensive breath work
Hmm.
with breath
Hmm.
holds. And so like if you're going to do that kind of breath work, you need to look at the warnings around it. But breath work in general, I feel like structured breath work was the first time I was able to quiet my mind, because it gave me something to focus on.
Right.
Whereas with
Yeah. Yeah.
meditation, it was hard to get out of my head.
Yeah, yeah, and thoughts were always intrude. And people get, and here's the thing: you can't get mad at your brain if you're trying to do that, because if you do it, you just make it worse. One, and two, your brain is doing what you told it to do,
Mm,
which is solve problems. Come up. It's busy. You told it to be busy, so it's being busy. So I recently started introducing a short practice at the end of my business day, and allowing and telling my body that it's okay to let go.
mm,
And that's been very helpful in me sleeping better, because I've always slept great. My head hits the pillow, I'm out 8 hours solid. Good. Lately, nope. 4 a.m., 3 a.m. Oh, but wait, two. How about two?
mm,
It's like ding. And I can get back to sleep if that happens. Nope. And I was like, this is not sustainable. Sleep is incredibly important, because you can't think unless you get good sleep, because that's what makes your brain work and your body and everything else. So I was like, okay, clearly there's some things I need to let go of to tell my body that it's safe, my brain that it's safe. You can let go of these things. You do not have to keep doing them.
yeah.
And making lists is a beautiful thing too, by the way.
Yeah, I had a spiritual coach who she would have me do these like dumps at the end of the day, and she was like, let it be messy. Like just like she calls it rage on the page, which is not a list, but similarly to a list, just at the end of the day, like letting all that go on paper, and then like it is safe to let that go. But then also lists from practical perspective on like
Mm-hmm.
I can let this out of my head because I have it on
You have to
paper.
think about it.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. I feel like we were doing some great conversations, but have we derailed a little bit from Worthy of Wealth? Maybe we need to come back.
This is all about worthy of wealth.
Okay, great, great,
Yeah,
good, good, good.
this is like what people think that being worthy of wealth is just real mindset, but the mindset again, it won't work unless you have a regulated nervous system.
Hmm.
But yeah, whatever questions you have to reel us back into worthy of wealth, but this is what it's all about.
Yeah, okay, good, good. I just want to make sure that we weren't like, because I have
Yeah,
a tendency to do that.
this is
I have a
this
tendency
is
to
what it's all
get off
about.
the rails a little bit. So yeah, I mean, for those people who are just tuning in, because I see a few folks that are tuning in fairly recently, worthy of wealth, and if you have a question around, oh, do I have challenges there or not, and what is it? It can be anything from you not being able to hold on to money, or maybe you have a narrative that say, well, easy come, easy go around money, which, by the way, is healthy. Or maybe you get promoted, but you don't really make any more money. Or maybe you feel like you have to check all the boxes and be super qualified to feel worthy of moving up, getting a raise, more responsibilities, etc. I know that I see that a lot in the coaches that I coach. They feel like, well, I need to get another certification in order to charge more. No one has ever asked me about my certifications. I have a
Yeah.
lot of them. No one has ever asked me about any of them. And Allison, do you have any you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, like, again, like, I always go back to my career as an example because that was, like, one of my biggest patterns of, like, attracting jobs where I kept attracting jobs that were paid under market value and had an epic amount of responsibility. In my clients, I see, like, I have a lot of clients who are service providers or other entrepreneurs, and I see them all the time dealing with, like, another way that worthiness can show up in your career is what you're willing to accept in behavior from other people. And then I love what you kind of touched on this a couple of times. We haven't really dived into it, but like other signs of not feeling worthy of wealth. Well, we can even talk about so I have a quiz called the Wealth Wound quiz. And so like if we want to go into like the 5 main money mindset issues are avoiding your money,
Mm-hmm.
feeling unworthy of money,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like money is scarce, it's a limited resource, being afraid that it's going to go away or that you won't have it, and then feeling like a martyr around it, where like as soon as you have it, I feel like other people should have it, or I'm a bad person if I
I'm
have
not
money.
worthy. Yes.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Other people need it more than me. I've heard that before.
yeah. You can't get poor enough to make everybody else have enough money. And so one thing you said a couple times we haven't dived into is like I never have any money, or I'm afraid to spend my money. And so like again, the fix for that is always going to be a combination of all these things we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you find yourself in a pattern where you never have any money or your paycheck is always gone. So like what's happening there? I'll let you kind of jump in here and then because I don't want to like take over with because I can go through like the whole process because it's always mindset, practical, nervous system,
Right.
energetics.
Right. 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 Yeah. I mean, what I find more often in the people that I coach isn't necessarily that they don't have any money. Of course, there's always a money concern. It's more around when we really drill down, we understand that money is somehow linked to badness.
Money is linked. So that, yeah,
Mm.
money is linked to badness. It's interesting
Wealthy
because,
people are evil, that kind of thing.
yeah, the it's interesting that you say that because I feel like that is a huge when I do live trainings, that's what resonates with people a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like if we think about super rich people and we think they did something bad or I would never do that or you know what I mean?
They're
To
inherently
me,
bad people because they're wealthy.
yeah, I would link that to like normally I would link that to like the martyr one, but on the quiz results, that's the lowest result. So when I
Mm-hmm.
think about, I almost wonder if that's more of like avoidance, like I'm avoiding money because I don't want to be a bad
Bad,
person.
right? I don't want to be
Yeah,
a bad person. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I know that that was certainly for me. That was one, and it was not anything that was ever articulated in my family. So one thing that to help people understand whether you may or may not have a wealth wound, because typically these are not conscious programs at all. They're totally subconscious. You're not consciously thinking, "Oh, let me push money away." Of course not. You're like, "Oh, give it to me." What happens is in our family structures, particularly with one of my clients recently, I was like, okay, well, tell me, what was the conversation around money around the dinner table in the evening if your family had dinner together? It was like, oh yeah, dinners were pretty tense and awful, but my dad was always talking about
Mm,
how we don't have enough money and yelling about how somebody spent something or yelling at my mom because it was a kind of tense family situation because she bought something and we money doesn't grow on trees and all that. So if
scarcity.
that's the language that you hear, chances are that's in your psyche somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, you may logically say, well, that's not true. I know otherwise. And your body doesn't care. Neither does your limbic brain. It doesn't care. Neither does your cerebellum, which your cerebellum is the seat of all these mental programs that totally subconscious that rule all of our actions. Yay.
Yeah.
And we need to rewrite those.
Yeah. I think so scarcity was a big one in my family too. Like,
Mm,
I remember when I think I was in high school, I was the first one in my immediate family to go to college, like my immediate family to go to college and the only one. And when I decided that I wanted to go, I remember talking to my parents about it who were divorced at the time, and both of their reaction was like, "You figure that out financially." They were like, "You got it," because like they just didn't believe, they didn't know how that money was gonna show up. And I
mm,
remember this like, my parents, I don't remember them stressing out too much about money. I remember my dad being very, like, he was more verbally stressed out than my mom was around it. But I remember I was like 7 years old and we were in the process of moving. And I remember asking my mom, I must have picked up on their anxiety around moving and finances. 7 years old, asking my mom, like, how much does it cost to move? And I think she said something like $300. And I was like, oh my God, that is so much money. And being so afraid of like,
mhm.
at 7 years old, like we pick up these
Yeah.
messages. And
Yeah.
so the key to that, like, depending on what your money mindset issue is, the solution is, so
Hmm.
like for scarcity, it's abundance.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so affirmations around abundance, seeing what you have around you. That's why the gratitude lists
Hmm.
are so powerful. Um, and then when you start practicing abundance, then making sure that you feel safe with it in your
Yeah,
body.
absolutely. I want to say hi to Patrick. I had to hop over to my smart device to see who was tuning in. But I want to say hi to Patrick tuning in from LinkedIn. He said great insights on a touchy topic. Touchy topic. Say that 3 times fast. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a touchy topic because also I feel it's interesting you bring that up, Patrick, because I feel like people don't necessarily there's like some shame around money too. There can be a lot of shame around money, and I know that there are some prominent folks have done some work around shame and connected to how does that show up around wealth, and certainly talking about any sort of roadblocks, mental roadblocks, mindset issues, limiting beliefs, etc., around money or wealth can feel shameful, because, and this is really interesting, comes up sometimes in coaching too, particularly for those people who've never been coached before and gone into coaching. They feel like, well, there's nothing wrong. I don't want to feel like a failure and I have to have coaching. I was like, that's got nothing to do with coaching. Like, coaching is not for people who are failures. That's just not what it's about. But to be fair, that's what I used to believe too.
Hmm.
Many, 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 many years ago, I thought that, well, you shouldn't need help because that's bad, because that means you're broken. That's not true. And the
Hmm.
same sort of stigmas around talking about money or
That's
how.
really interesting. I
Mhm.
actually had I had the opposite problem where
Okay.
I felt like I didn't feel shame around it. Um, but I felt like I had an addiction to getting support.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so like I felt like I don't think I've ever said it this way, but I think the belief was like I can't succeed unless I have a mentor.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or like I'm not going to get ahead unless I get this help from someone else.
Mhm.
And I figured out that the need behind that was actually like reassurance. Like what I was looking for was reassurance from
Right.
someone. And when
Right.
I figured that out, it changed how and there was also some beliefs around like, I need to learn more, I need to learn more, I need to learn more. And so some people do that through certifications, and I was doing it through maybe hiring mentors. And so I realized like I don't need to learn more because everything I need is already inside of me, and sourcing reassurance. So knowing that the need was, and that could be, if you want to label it, it could be like a scarcity thing of
Mhm.
like, I have everything I need. I am safe. Like I am supported, and getting that from within myself. And then when I hire people, it's just like icing on top.
Right. 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 Yeah. I mean, It's feeling worthy of wealth is so closely tied to feeling worthy of abundance. I mean, when you think about abundance, abundance is a pretty big term. It holds a lot in it. Like it can be, monetary wealth. It can be other kinds of wealth too. Good health, abundance, and good health, abundance of safety, security, things that you need, or abundance of fun, abundance of freedom. Everybody has different things that they resonate with when you start using the term abundance. And when we're talking about worthy of wealth, that's a part of that abundance bundle, if you want.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And when we're limiting ourselves, it's really interesting. There's a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. He's a psychologist. It was wrote years ago, and it's okay read. It's not the most fabulous ever, but he has a fantastic theory, which I tested, that everybody has an upper limit switch that they self-defined. Now, this starts to develop when we're young, when we start seeing what's around us, our familiar structure, our outline, that starts to form what life is and how much abundance and happiness and success we should allow ourselves to have. But everybody's like, really? We put a limit on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do. And I tested it, and it's true. We do.
Yeah.
Like, I would find that anytime I'm like, wow, and my husband and we're getting along so well, we're having so much fun, I would screw it up.
Yeah. And we can do that. It can be really sneaky because, like, if we're like looking at the money example, we can say,
Mm,
I think my upper limit is X, but what I find, like, so I'll have clients who can make a certain amount. They'll make like a lot of cash, for example, and
mm,
then they can never keep it. So they think that their upper limit is at a certain level, but really it's much lower, and that's why their expenses are so high.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's been a lot of studies too done. I don't know, Allison, if you've read any about this around people who win the lottery, and the
Mhm.
fact that a lot of them just simply just implode. Like they
Yeah.
implode because it's the first time maybe they've ever had a massive wealth. And it's not just like a couple $1,000s. We're talking like millions of dollars. They've never conceived of this kind of money. And maybe they're even the first ones in their family that's ever experienced any kind of wealth at all. And now it's just overabundance of wealth. So that triggers their upper limit switch hardcore.
Yeah.
And they do everything in their power to get rid of it so they'll feel safe again.
Yeah. That again, that totally goes back to that, like, what are the solutions for feeling worthy of wealth? It's mindset, and then the practical action, and then dealing with the triggers, which is basically regulating your nervous system. So in that
Right.
case, it's like I have a client who is like, she's doing really well, but her goal is to get to 20K months. And she's like, I've just never done that before. And so part of the challenge is not just the practical side,
Mm-hmm.
but like we have to make sure that her body feels safe with 20K months so that when she gets there, she can keep it.
Yeah, and she doesn't implode. I think Petra just asked, who is the author? Gay Hendricks, Gay Hendricks, called The Big Leap. It's a really interesting book, and
Mm.
the only frustrating thing, like a lot of self-help motivate or these interesting books like this, is he didn't really define what to do about it.
Mm.
And I'm sure it was like, oh, call me, I'll help you. Yeah, that's great. And I'm a firm believer, if you put in this is how if they want to call you, they'll call you. You don't. I feel like the more you put out there, it's perfectly fine. But that was the only gap with his book. But it was a fantastic theory that's upper limit switch actually was a thing, and it is indeed a thing. So finding out what that is and getting curious, just being really openly curious around, what is my narrative about money? Allison, what have you heard around narratives that make your coach ears perk up?
I always think about money stories. Like I go back to like the narratives for me is I have a workbook called the money mapping system. And so I look at like there's a few main areas. One is toxic agreements. So like
Mm-hmm.
what are the things I find myself thinking I have to do even though nobody asked me to? Some examples are like I've got to retire my parents or retire my husband even if they didn't ask me to. Another example of a toxic agreement is like I can't make more money than my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And then another common money pattern is family systems, like you mentioned earlier. So, like, what did my mom teach me about money? What did my dad teach me about money?
Mm-hmm.
What does my culture teach me about money?
Right.
So those are two of four examples of like looking at narratives is just looking at your family, toxic
Mm-hmm.
agreements. Another one is resentments. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at, are there any resentments I have that relate to my career? So like, do I resent a boss? Do I resent someone that I went to college with? Do I resent a colleague? And then looking at what that is about to reveal another pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I'm mad at my boss for not paying me enough. Well, is that his responsibility or is it mine?
Right. Right. It's definitely.
Uh, yeah, and so
Yeah.
always like those are the three main buckets I always go back to are toxic agreements, resentments, and family systems,
Mm-hmm.
um, to find the narrative that you
Yeah.
believe in.
Yeah. And once you find the narrative, that's when you can start to rescript it and managing, like Allison mentioned, regulating the nervous system. Because when you start making changes, your
That's when you have to
body,
regulate. Yeah,
yeah, your body, you have to regulate the body's response because the body's used to being a certain way. So
yeah.
that's when you may start feeling actually more anxiety instead of less, or it's really very interesting. I feel like we can continue talking at some length, and we won't. You definitely want to check out if you're on listening from YouTube. Check out Alice's links. We put it there in the YouTube live show notes. On LinkedIn, what I'll do is I'll pop in those links in the comments so you can get access to her. I think you called it a Worthy of Wealth Wealth Wound quiz.
Mhm. Yeah, you can just take the quiz and see.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then I'll follow with some free tools and other opportunities for you to get support around each of those wealth wounds.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, Allison. I
Thanks
feel
for
like we could
having
talk for
me.
hours. I really want to, but I know you've got to go. So it's been fun having you on the show, and all of you tuning in either now or later. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. And again, if you feel like, hey, I'm not too sure about this, you have a question, reach out to us. We're here to help you. That's why we do this, right? And until next time, my friends, keep elevating. Bye for now.